This week, Theresa Lanowitz from LevelBlue is with us to discuss getting security teams the support they need to succeed. Then Renuka Nadkarni from Ariaka joins us to talk about unified SASE as a service. Finally, in the enterprise security news, Human, Reliance AI, and Watchtower raise funding this week. Alternative paths to becoming a CISO. Vendor booths don't have to suck for vendors or conference attendees. Budget planning guidance for 2025. CISOs might not be that great at predicting their own future needs. Use this one easy trick to bypass EDR, analyzing the latest breaches and malware, and you probably shouldn't buy a Fisker Ocean no matter how cheap they get. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Graylog elevates enterprise-level cybersecurity through its comprehensive SIEM, centralized log management, and API security solutions. Built on the Graylog platform, Graylog Security combines SIEM, security analytics, threat detection, and incident response capabilities. Unlike traditional SIEMs, which offer complex and costly setups, Graylog Security simplifies security and operational challenges with an optimal blend of licensing, people, and infrastructure costs. To see a demo, visit securityweekly.com/Graylog. Global enterprises rely on Savient's Identity Cloud for unparalleled visibility and control over every single human and machine identity. Enterprises can better secure business processes, enable digital operations, and empower everyone who works for them and with them. Savient provides right time, right level access to the digital technologies and tools they need to do their best work. Visit securityweekly.com/Savient to schedule a demo. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Pasta Day. This is episode 380, recorded on Thursday, October 17th, 2024. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and this interview today is sponsored by LevelBlue. Today, we're talking about cyber resilience challenges and helping security teams find their way out of their silos. We're excited to have Theresa Lanowitz back with us today. She's a chief cybersecurity evangelist at LevelBlue, formerly the cybersecurity arm of AT&T. Welcome, Theresa.
Hi, Adrian. It's great to be back with you again.
Yeah, likewise. It's good to talk with you again. How are you feeling about Pasta Day?
I think it's great. I had no idea there was such a thing as National Pasta Day. I'll have to look in my refrigerator and see what I might have for this evening.
Yeah, nice. Very good. So we try and pull a silly day of the day. There's so many chocolate days, by the way. We used to have a co-host who hated chocolate, and I think like 3 episodes in like a month or 2 month time, there were National Chocolate Days, and every time I saw that, I included it just for him.
Well, that's interesting. If it's a National Chocolate Day, if it can happen 3 times, doesn't it imply if there's like a National Pasta Day or National Chocolate Day, it's just one day?
Yeah, I mean, there will probably also be like a fettuccine Alfredo day that is celebrated differently in Italy than it is here. But I don't know. They make up all kinds of crazy days. We've had some really, really weird ones. But yeah, that's what I love about it. That's why I always pull one out, is just to see how weird they get. So yeah, really excited about the topic for today. And I really enjoyed reading the report. It was very much, and I'm sure it was like this for you as well, in making it, but portions of it where I wanted to throw it across the room, like a lot of frustrating stuff going on in the industry. So this is for listeners. You should check out the report. It is a survey with a healthy sample size. Over 1,000 people responded to the survey, and generally kind of feeling out more of the high level security program process related issues. It's very focused on cyber resilience and how the security teams interact with the other parts of the business and IT particularly. So what was it like putting this together and going through those responses, Theresa?
It's incredible. It is absolutely this wonderful piece of research that I am fortunate to be able to do every year. And as you mentioned, it's a healthy sample size. We had 1,050 survey participants across 18 different countries. So that's always interesting, making sure that those other countries, because we want to make this research, this report, vendor neutral, forward looking, and actionable. And even though we are a US based company, we do have a global presence. So we always want to make sure we're including other geographies as well. So 1,050 survey participants across 18 different countries, C suite and C suite -1, C suite -2. So more of those economic buyers, those decision makers. And then we also surveyed 7 different vertical markets or 7 different industry specific areas: healthcare, retail, finance, manufacturing, transportation, energy and utilities, and US state, local, and higher education. So very healthy sample size. And then what we do is we take each of those industry specific markets and we create a report based on just that data. So, for example, we have a healthcare report, a financial services report, and so on. But it is absolutely my favorite thing to do every single year because you get so much incredible data back. And there's always that one data point or 2 data points that you get back and you say, this is shocking, or why am I surprised by this? So it's absolutely an incredible activity to do, an incredible research project every year.
Yeah, and something that has been occurring to me, for a while. Particularly when I talk to family and friends who are outside the industry. Cybersecurity breaches. It's very mainstream now. The general public is used to seeing headlines and how security impacts businesses. And I think it's become clear at this point, and we really didn't know in the early days how big of an impact cybersecurity would have on a business. So it was natural to worry that maybe it could kill businesses. It could have a fatal impact on businesses. And after, it's been a while, and we really don't see that happening. We do see companies recover, particularly large public companies, especially recover from breaches. But that's not to say that we can't worry about security at all. Like it's still a priority. So as I'm reading through this, I'm kind of thinking like where is that part of the struggle that we have here getting business leaders to care about cybersecurity? Is for a long time we told them it's the most important thing, or at least some of us told them it's the most important thing. And they're like, yeah, like I see all these companies getting breached and they just kind of carry on and their stock prices bounce back. So I wonder if that's had a rebound effect to where, okay, like you cried wolf too many times. Like we're not gonna, we're not going to include you at all. Versus if we were maybe, I don't know, a little more conservative with our estimates of the impact that breaches would have, maybe they trust us more. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's an interesting contrarian point of view to take, because if you're sitting in the general public and you read about company A experience a breach or company B experiencing a breach, and then, you as an individual consumer, you get the email or the letter in the mail saying, hey, your credit card was part of this breach, and life goes on, as you mentioned. But what we do see is we see more compliance, more regulation coming out to make sure that personally identifiable information, or PII or PHI, is not compromised. We see more of, and this is one of the things we uncovered in the report, is that cybersecurity budgets are largely reactive. So when some big event happens, companies across the board, even if the event didn't happen in their specific industry, they'll say, you know what, we need to make sure that we are implementing, name your favorite cybersecurity control. So one of the things that we see going on right now, big push towards multi-factor authentication. And because we've seen some ransomware attacks over the past year or so that were caused because multi-factor authentication was not enabled at the server level, and we also still see this move to, make sure you're using secure passwords, make sure you're updating your software, making sure you're taking the latest patches, those types of things. So while I appreciate your contrarian view, and I love always taking those contrarian views, I think as an industry, we are doing more. And I think this responsibility for cybersecurity has rippled across everybody inside of an organization, inside of a company, but also to us as individual consumers as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I think particularly, I'm thinking of this as I look at I talk to a lot of CISOs on a regular basis, and they've just got too much. I worked on the vendor side in some niche areas, and one of the things you would hear a lot is, yeah, sure, that's important, but like the list of things that are important that I should be worried about is so long, things fall off the list. And look, I can do up to number 15, but you're number 19 on that list. So it's had me thinking, is particularly when we start talking about resilience, like do we even have that order right? Is one of the things. Like, I think traditionally what we thought was important, as we start seeing these breaches as attacks change, maybe that list shuffles around, and it becomes difficult to, and one of the things noted in the report is yeah, the budget is very reactive and changes because also the environments and the technologies coming in and the innovations, like everything else is dynamic as well. So I guess I would expect the budget to be somewhat reactive, but then we still have that fundamental stuff, like talking about MFA still not being on. Like, we thought yeah, MFA is not perfect, but certainly that's another level of effort for the attacker, to make them jump through. And it seems like a no brainer to enable that on, say, your Snowflake accounts.
Well, you bring up such interesting points about CISOs having a list that's, their top 20, and they can realistically in a year maybe do 10. And then you look at some of the cybersecurity controls that, like you said, may not be perfect, but they are going to thwart the cyber adversary in many cases because the cyber adversary seeks the path of least resistance. But getting back to your list, maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe the CISO might be thinking a little too granular or too tactical in saying, hey, we have to implement these controls versus, and this is one of the things we talk about in the report, versus saying, you know what, we need to make sure that cybersecurity and the line of business are aligned. We know there's great technology out there. We know the tools work. We know these cybersecurity controls work. They do the job they're supposed to do, and they do nothing but get better. So from a technology perspective, we do nothing but get better. But what we uncovered in the report is that the cybersecurity team, even after all these years, they're still very siloed. And so breaking down those silos means that let's align with the line of business and make sure that we're focused on those critical few business objectives that the line of business might have and make sure we're implementing cybersecurity correctly. The other thing, and this is one of the things we talk about in terms of achieving true cyber resilience in order to bring all of the stakeholders together when something unforeseen happens to that IT estate, whether it be a cyber event, a man-made event, or some type of natural disaster. In bringing all of these teams together, we need to be more resilient across the board. And then the other thing we look at is this idea of secure by design. So secure by design means that from the very beginning, you're including security in what you're doing, whether that be from a budgeting perspective or just a strategic discussion perspective, or development perspectives. Oftentimes we hear so much about the portmanteau of DevOps, and now we're down this path of DevSecOps because the SBOMs are becoming so critically important. And we still don't necessarily do a very good job of DevSecOps. And if you look from a development perspective, security is just one of those non-functional requirements, just as performance. And, we're coming into the holiday shopping season, and here we are, 2024. If you think back 20 years ago when you were first starting out doing your holiday shopping online, performance was an issue. And now for the most part, performance is not an issue, except maybe day after Thanksgiving here in the United States, kind of those big sale days, you still kind of run into those big performance issues. But so from a non-functional perspective for the software itself, performance has been largely impacted. I'm not going to say it's perfect because I know that there are still performance issues out there, but security is not necessarily one of those things. And this is one of the things we report on the report, is that security is oftentimes an afterthought because it's living in a silo.
Yeah, we're not worried for with performance typically with the use of cloud, and even if you're not primarily in the cloud, I know some organizations like Etsy have traditionally bursted into the cloud. You're not waiting for servers to hit your doorstep, to be racked and implemented to increase your performance to be able to scale. So yeah, cloud has had a huge impact, I think, on resilience in general, and so has DevOps in that because they were seeking performance, a lot of the stuff that happened there gave us benefits from a security perspective as well. Except, security. I think we still struggle to be part of the cool club there, to be included in a lot of the stuff. And the report points a lot of this out, where we're just in terms of budget, in terms of literally being in the room when these kinds of decisions are being made. More often than not, we're still left out of that. So I think one of the challenges there, and this isn't something a product can solve for you, right? This is more getting leaders to care. Like what are you seeing that works to get the security team included in some of those discussions, in some of those meetings? Is it that just that we're seen as a blocker? Something that if we invite them, they're just going to get in the way. They're going to slow down the project. They're going to throw us off our schedule. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. When you speak with security practitioners, so frequently they will say, we don't want to be seen as blockers. We don't want to be seen as the people who are always saying no. And so it's interesting that security practitioners have had this introspective moment and they've come back and they've said, this is how the rest of the organization sees us. We have to make sure we're changing our our attitude. We have to make sure that we're changing the way we're viewed. So, internally, from a security practitioner standpoint, security practitioners and the security team can do a lot of good for themselves by going out, hosting brown bag lunches. We're in October, Cyber Awareness Month. I just did a cyber awareness presentation at a very large company, and the amount of work that they do internally to make everybody in the organization, whether you are an engineer, a project manager, a developer, the amount of work they do to make everybody cyber aware is absolutely incredible. So, if you're sitting in a larger organization, you can have the luxury of maybe starting some type of cyber education group. And it's not just making people take classes online throughout the year to make sure you're fulfilling compliance. It is a matter of really engaging with people. But also, then you look at it from the leadership perspective, and all too often, the cybersecurity team, as we mentioned, they're sitting in a silo. The CISO may not be reporting to the CEO. The CISO may, in many cases, be reporting to the CIO or the CTO. And the CTO, CIO, and CISO, you would think they're very complementary, but they have very different priorities. So it's a matter of making sure that senior leadership, especially the C suite, that CEO, really understands that the CISO needs to be part of those discussions. That's one of the things we uncovered in our research, is that when people are starting a new project, there's not necessarily a through line item for security. And you think about any project that you're starting, whether it be some type of IoT project, some type of web project, that security line item has to be in there to make sure that you're doing the right things from a security perspective, bringing in the right people, the right process, the right technology, but that you're also allocating enough budget for the right tooling and so on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the availability concerns also kind of come in at those design stages, at the design and architecture stages, and a lot of that, another thing that occurred to me reading this is it really is on business leaders in IT to actually do security. The security team often is just in a consulting role where their impact is indirect at best, because we don't patch systems, we don't manage the configurations of a lot of things. In some cases you do see maybe firewall admins on the security side, but it's an interesting point also, talking about all the different ways that security can integrate with the organization. Like I've seen CISOs under finance and risk, in very different parts of the, very separate from the IT organization. So it's I think those are all factors that you have to take into account when trying to figure out how to And an excellent tip that the way to the other departments in the businesses is the way to their heart is through their stomach. I think that's a very important point.
So you're saying have lunch and learn, bring catered lunch in, that sort of thing.
I'm saying bribe them with food. Let's just be clear here. But yeah, it's I think I talk to a lot of people in organizations that do get frustrated. They feel like the security work that they do isn't well supported, isn't recognized. They don't have the support they need, and oftentimes they're buried far enough deep in an organization that I have to tell them that, look, there's not a lot that you can do there. You can maybe look for another job where your security is more integral to the organization, but in some it's these people I'm talking to are not in a position where they're going to be able to convince somebody 3 or 4 levels above them to change their philosophy, their thinking about security.
Well, that comes down to a cultural behavior and sort of cultural visibility of security, right? And if you're a practitioner, you may not be able to convince your CEO 3, 4 levels above you, but your leadership certainly can. So as it goes up the chain, your leadership can certainly start to impact and influence those who are 1 level above them, 1 level above them, and so on. And I always like to say that cybersecurity it's not a technical issue. It's not a technical problem. And I think this is where we, as an industry, probably struggle because we like to talk about our alerts and our how many breaches we're stopping, that sort of thing, right? So cybersecurity is not a technical issue; it's a business requirement. And as you mentioned, security is integrated into all of these different areas. Certainly in through the CIO, through the CTO, but also in through the CFO, through the risk team, the governance, risk, and compliance team. So having security be part of everybody's responsibility is critical. And it can't just be a checkbox. It actually has to be doing. Because as you said, yes, we know what patches need to be made, but we in the security teams, we're not necessarily on those operations sides saying, oh, we're going to roll out a patch to this piece of software today. We're in an advisory capacity, but we also have to be that through line item, that through line budget item, that through line, did you talk to the security people? Are the security people okay with this? Does this make sense? Does this meet our security compliance and requirements issues? And here's an interesting stat, one of these things that just, again, as I mentioned, when you do primary research such as this, when you start to get data back, you look at it, you say, how can that be true? 72% of governance organizations do not understand what cyber resilience means. They say it's cybersecurity. It's not this whole organization problem. So there's a lot of learning that has to go on inside of organizations today.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's there's a lot of these almost philosophical concepts that I think need to be better understood, and there's a great book out there talking about resilience in general, or a couple books I wanted to recommend. One is the um, uh, security cyber. What is it? I've got the book laying around here somewhere. Maybe it's upstairs. It's um, Chaos Engineering for Security, or Security Chaos Engineering by Kelly Shortridge is a really interesting read, and it's all about resilience. And then A Seat at the Table was a really interesting one that a CISO recommended to me, which isn't about cybersecurity, but it's more about CIOs kind of going from the old school of thinking to the new school of thinking. So that book is kind of filled with these shifts in thinking that you need to go through. That you're mentioning here, and I'm about halfway through it, and I'm loving it. It's got a lot of humor in it, and I think it's really relevant to cybersecurity as well. To what a lot of these teams are missing.
I have to check those books out. They sound really interesting.
And then something I saw in here. I was curious as to your opinion on why C-level execs are more likely than their teams to report that cybersecurity is discussed in computing planning. Like, why the discrepancy there, I wonder?
So you're saying C-level execs are more likely.
Yeah, they're saying that security teams are included, but cybersecurity is saying, "No, we're not included."
I think that is the classic breakdown in communications, where the C-level team expects that this is happening, and in reality, the practitioners in the cybersecurity teams, they're not being included in these discussions. It could be for timing purposes. It could be because of something that you brought up earlier, which is sort of the cultural awareness, the cultural impact, the attitude that cybersecurity professionals may kind of send out to the organization. So again, it comes down to cybersecurity not being just a governance checkbox, but actually practicing on every project. And it's interesting, and that was an interesting data point that I found, that C-level executives think that cybersecurity is included when in reality it's not. And a lot of that, again, comes from how the organization is structured. Is cybersecurity seen as a business problem that is going to have to be part of every project that's out there? And one of the things we also know is that, as I mentioned, those cybersecurity budgets, they're reactive because of a breach, a supply chain issue, a compliance issue. That might be something that in sort of in a retrospective type of environment, after a project is completed and launched, once you start to see security issues, the leadership can then say, well, we thought that security was included here. Why has it not really been included? So it comes down to those cultural issues, those appearances, the impression that the cybersecurity team makes.
Yeah, so some kind of communication breakdown and middle management between there, maybe. Somebody's saying ththings that people want to hear, not what's actually happening, maybe.
That could be it. And if you remember, when the idea of penetration testing first came out, people would say, okay, yes, of course, we're going to do penetration testing. And they would say, well, no, the cybersecurity team's going to do that. And the cybersecurity team would say, well, I'm not necessarily doing that. There was confusion as to where that was being done and who was actually doing it. So the cybersecurity team was oftentimes just putting a checkbox up saying, of course, this is going to be done during the development phase, for example. So it comes down to, as we mentioned, it's those cultural communication norms. It is maybe something that a project manager needs to be reporting on, and maybe the project manager needs to make sure that all of those stakeholders who are supposed to be involved in the project are actually involved in the project. And again, this is how cybersecurity can actually weave itself into other parts of the organization. The project manager, maybe for the past couple of projects, hasn't had a cyber stakeholder. Now they need to bring in a cyber stakeholder. So who is that cyber stakeholder? Where does that cyber stakeholder come from? What are they expected to do? So the project manager probably has to learn some new things as well.
Yeah, yeah, it could be one of those best laid plans thing, where it's intended, and that's why it's in there in the original plan. Kind of like how every budget starts out with training, and somehow nobody ever gets to go to training. It gets moved around and shifted into, at least in my experience, and with some folks I've talked to, it seems like training is the first thing to get gobbled up by some other category, and that money gets shuffled away.
Because everything is so intuitively easy that we don't need training on things anymore.
And then I read reports like this, and it's like, people need training. I'm like, I know, but that budget, you got to put a priority on it. And I think that's what I'm coming away with a lot of this stuff is, look, if you want those results, you got to put a priority. You got to prioritize it at higher levels here.
It's putting the priority on it, and it's also making sure that it's understood why this is important from a business perspective, not just, oh, look at my logs and, I'm telling you I've managed these alerts and some of them were false positives. It is from a business perspective, here's why we're doing this.
Well, I hope we get to talk about this more. I know I'm talking to you on Business Security Weekly on Monday, and then we're talking to you again on this show on November 7th, because I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of this report. There's a lot of great stuff in here.
Great. Thank you. I'm looking forward to those conversations.
All right. And with that, thank you so much, Theresa, for joining us today on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you, Adrian. It was wonderful to talk with you.
All right. Stick around. Coming up, When we come back, we're going to talk Unified SASE as a Service with Renuka Nadkarni from Ariaka.